Vaccine Zombie from Mike Adams and naturalnews.tv. Again, a great way to help spread this kind of information. Moving down the ugly headlines, the chaos is everywhere. We get to our econocrash headlines, and we move to allgov.com to meet the only new bank to open this year. Banks by the hundreds have been closing in recent years during the recession and the weak economic recovery, again, euphemistic language for controlled demolition of a fake economy, fiat currency, and private central banks. The tough climate has made it difficult for new financial institutions to get off the ground. In fact, only one new federally insured bank has opened its doors so far in 2010 throughout the entire United States, and it's in a used double-wide trailer. Lakeside Bank in Lake Charles, Louisiana, which opened on July 26, is run by Hardy Spence, former Louisiana State football player who came out of retirement at age 70. He was brought in by local real estate developer Andrew Vachiv, who raised $13 million in capital to start the bank. The bank's investors hope Lakeside does not go the way of the 280 small banks and thrifts that have gone out of business since January 2008. There are now less than half as many banks and thrifts as there were in '84. Lately, the Lake Charles economy has been boosted by Casino, a new factory that makes parts for nuclear reactors, and the oil and natural gas industry. So, obviously, the bank is going to be a success when it's built on such time-tested and sustainable practices like casinos and oil and nuke reactors. The death of cash. The Economic Collapse blog gets into governments all over the world banning large cash transactions, and just one example from a source that actually I believe I have linked to several times throughout this episode. I forget who. Check. Technical difficulties. I forget who turned me on to this site, borderlandbeat.com. Mexico targets laundering with plan to limit cash transactions. And you've already seen the PR for the death of cash. Now, of course, is it more convenient to use cards? Absolutely. But how did it get that way? How are we getting further along that way? Surprise, surprise, Tiny Tim Geithner meets with bloggers, but of course, they are all straight-up corporate bloggers. Like bloggers from the Washington Post and Reuters and Politico. And then, of course, foundation-funded left gatekeepers like Huffington Post and Mother Jones, who, yes, do good work, but again, it all traces back to Carnegie and the Rockefellers and MacArthur and other foundation-funded fronts. Analyst says Citigroup is cooking the books. More on that from foxbusiness.com. Record number in government anti-poverty programs. Surprise, surprise. Homelessness up 50% in New York. That's from myfoxny.com. And I believe they pretty much stole the story from someone else. Have they updated it? Yes, they did. hellskitchenlife.com. Existentialist cowboy gets into the conspiracies of rich men to rob you, enslave you, and wage aggressive wars at your expense. Where, of course, all loss is put to the public and all gain is privatized to the banksters, to the elite. Our last econocrash note is the trailer from a new documentary, which reminds me, as I was even just saying about privatizing the wealth and pushing public the debt. We mentioned last week the new documentary from Danny Schechter called Plunder that is actually available to stream on Netflix. I finished it off. It's well done. It does bring up a lot of good points, but it's also somewhat too lefty, too limited hangout. but it is there for you to watch. And again, I guess I'm somewhat more lenient sometimes when it comes to documentaries and anything that we would kind of cover on MediaMonarchy.com. Even if it's not the greatest in the world, it's probably still better than you watching episodes of God knows what. Because I've watched some God knows what. But there's a new film coming out, and of course this is all major. From the director of No End in Sight, Charles Ferguson, who was nominated for an Oscar, Sony Pictures Classic is putting out Inside Job, the first film to expose the shocking truth behind the economic crisis of 2008, which is not true, but this is just a blurb for the film. Global financial meltdown at a cost of over $20 trillion resulted in millions of people losing their homes and jobs. Through extensive research and interviews with major financial insiders, politicians, and journalists, Inside Job traces the rise of a rogue industry and unveils the corrosive relationships which have corrupted politics, regulation, and academia. Narrated by Academy Award winner Matt Damon, Inside Job, made on location in the U.S., Iceland, England, France, Singapore, and China.
Share prices continued to tumble.
Lehman Brothers was forced to declare itself bankrupt.
The largest single point drop.
The regulators, they had the power to do every case that I made when I was state attorney general. They just didn't want to.
We are watching this tsunami coming.
They were having massive private gains, public loss. The financial engineer built dreams. When those dreams turn out to be nightmares, other people pay for it.
Bear Stearns, Goldman Sachs, Lehman Brothers, they knew what was happening.
What do you think about selling securities which your own people think are crap? Does that bother you?
As a hypothetical?
No, this is real.
What do you think of Wall Street incomes these days?
Excessive.
By 1986, he was making millions of dollars and thought it was because he was smart.
Chuck Prince famously said, "We have to dance until the music stops." Actually, the music had stopped already when he said that.
At some point, I used the word Armageddon.
These people are risk takers, they're impulsive. I see a lot of cocaine use, prostitution.
So did these guys know that they were doing something dangerous?
I think they did.
I don't hear confessions.
What can we believe in? There's nothing we can trust anymore.
We had a whole group of people looking at this for whatever reason.
You can't be serious. If you would have looked, you would have found things.
It's a Wall Street government.
Why do you think there isn't a more systematic investigation being undertaken?
Because then you'll find the culprits.
I don't believe I have to discuss that with you.
You come to us today telling us we're sorry, we won't do it again. Trust us. Well, I have some people in my constituency that actually robbed some of your banks, and they say the same thing.
I never heard him mention those things.
Could we turn this off for a second?
No, we can't. Inside Job, and if you go watch the video, you may not have caught it in just listening to the audio, but in the number of course, experts that they talked to, you may have heard George Soros in there about dancing till the music stops. George Soros, convicted financial criminal. He funds some of our aforementioned left gatekeeper limited hangout sites. Deeply involved in the shell game that we see going on in the world. He's even implicated in selling people out to the Nazis. These are the kind of people that we're dealing with. And of course, when we're talking Wall Street, it of course always inevitably links back to Germany and the Nazis. The Rockefellers and Standard Oil and IBM and IG Farben and Bayer, Coca-Cola, Ford, Disney, on and on and on. They're all connected. So this film, Inside Job, while I'm sure does contain good information, and I'm sure will rile people up and probably soften them up for whatever sort of global regulations we need more one world currency. We need more control. Then we'll make sure this will never happen again if you just give us more control this time. Not the first film to explode that. I'd like to say first film fully I saw exposing the controlled demolition of the economy. There's a little documentary called 2020 Hindsight, Censorship on the Front Line. My man Richard Grove of TragedyAndHope.com, PeaceRevolution.org, exclusively available through MediaMonarchy.com, CorbeReport.com, GnosticMedia.com, Maria.net, DeadlineLive.info. Your donation to alternative media outlets is what keeps this information going and what lets us continue to do these kind of data mining and analysis just to try and make sense of all this. Again, I ain't the smartest guy in the world. I'm just trying to figure all this stuff out, but it doesn't take very long to realize that shit's rotten in Denmark. Let's quickly get through our geopolitics updates, which these all kind of sound like they could fit under our murder and mayhem heading. But we, of course, covered briefly, and unfortunately it's going to have to be briefly again, but do you remember the British spy that we covered last week who was found dead in a duffel bag? Dead codebreaker was linked to NSA intercept case. Top British codebreaker found mysteriously dead last week in his flat had worked with the NSA and British intelligence to intercept email messages that helped convict would-be bombers in the UK. Gareth Williams, 31, made repeated visits to the US to meet with the NSA and worked closely with British and US spy agencies to intercept and examine communications that passed between an al-Qaeda official in Pakistan and 3 men who were convicted last year of plotting to bomb transcontinental flights. There's even more on the London spy murder of Goats and Men, but we've got an interesting one from Cryptagon.com with more from the Washington Post. Roland W. Haas, senior intelligence officer in the U.S. Army Reserve who claimed in a 2007 memoir, which is linked up for us here, claiming that he was a CIA assassin, died over the weekend when he accidentally shot himself. According to an account in the Noonan, Georgia Times-Herald, passing motorists saw Haas on the side of the road and heard the pop of a gunshot. Patrolmen soon discovered Haas, 58, lying face down behind his car and pronounced him dead. He shot himself in the femoral artery of his right leg. Now, Cryptagon notes that his pet goat is more likely to be a CIA assassin than this Roland W. Haas. But the other interesting thing to note, bonus coincidence points when we calculate the odds of 2 suspected bogus spooks called Roland dying of gunshot wounds in a 2-year period. That would, of course, be referencing Roland Carnaby, self-proclaimed CIA agent gunned down. Mystery over Russian general found dead on Turkish beach. More on that from The Guardian. 18 nations wrap up mock terror exercises in the Panama Canal. And returning to BorderlandBeat.com, asking the question, what's next after the arrest of Mexican kingpin known as La Barbie? And you can check out his smiling photo. And we'll get more into the border wars in just a few moments.